So here in Australia, I'm at 3 p.m. Perth time, and we've got a mix of around Australia, but various times through to 5 p.m. And thank you for getting up early, late, whenever, for joining us all. And most importantly, welcome to Australia to everyone, or welcome to those who've joined from Australia from our clinical research network. So what we wanted to do today, hang on, let me just flick, hey, that's hopefully worked. So when these virtual visits sort of got up and going, I was chatting to Mel about what we might be able to offer from Australia. So my background is that I've been working as a clinical research nurse in the UK for a number of years, and that's how I got involved in Iacrn. So Jen asked me if I'd get involved in these visits. Now I'm working back in Australia, and together with Mel, we were trying to think about what we could offer from an Australian perspective. And I guess today has a bit of a dual purpose for us. So on the one hand, it's an opportunity for us to show CRNs in Australia, potentially a little bit about Iacrn. And then for those of you outside of Australia, to give you a little bit of a feel of what we're up to here in Australia. Mel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, just to unmute myself. But no, that's great. That's a great intro, Kelly. Fantastic.
Oh, good. So the first thing that we wanted to do, sorry, I've just got to move my screen around a little bit here. So the first thing that we wanted to do, so traditionally in Australia, I guess towards the spirit of reconciliation with traditional owners of the Australian land, it's common to have a welcome to country or an acknowledgement of country where we really pay our respects to those who have been on this land first. So because we don't have a traditional custodian of our land to give the welcome to country, we just have here an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us today. So it's a really important part of what we do in Australia, a really important part of recognising traditional owners here. And in Perth, I'm on country called Whadjuk country here in WA. So I wanted to start, as I said, we're having a panel discussion today. A couple of little housekeeping bits and pieces first, if that's okay. So we'll ask you if you're not chatting, just to keep yourself muted. So I may have small children running into the room. My son especially likes to be on Zoom meetings. So if I do, I apologise in advance. It's great to see videos on because it's really lovely to see all of you. In respect to questions, so how we'll run things is to try and really manage a panel type discussion. But because there aren't yet hundreds of you online, what we may be able to do is sort of integrate questions as we go. So please do use that chat function to type anything that you want to chat about. And just, I guess, an FYI as well, as you know that the session will be recorded. So just to make sure you don't say anything you'd rather not be recorded, I guess. So our panel who are all online, I won't go through and introduce everyone. I'll ask them to do that themselves so they can give you a good idea of their background. Mel, are you happy to start?
Again, I have to unmute. We have a saying in our board as well that if you start talking and you're on mute, it's $2. So we have a tip jar that is rapidly filling up. So I'm not going to be the first one to do that. So, yeah, look, thanks, Kelly. My name's Melanie Gentgall, and I'm a registered nurse by profession, and I've been working in clinical trials for over 25 years, particularly in early phase research. And I started up a phase 1 unit for one of our flagstone universities here in Australia, the University of Adelaide, and ran that for 10 years. But my background was really, it began as a nurse, and like many nurses, I fell into clinical trials, and sadly in Australia that still continues to happen, and just loved it. And I think I loved it because it gave me the flexibility with a young family, but it also gave me an opportunity to use my clinical skills in a way that, that I hadn't had an opportunity to do, even as a specialist renal nurse, which was where I got my grounding in clinical trials. After I left the phase 1 unit that I was managing, I then stepped into an education role with a human research ethics committee, and I've been involved with HREX for over a decade now as well. And from there, we created our new business Praxis, and Praxis is about education and training with a real dedication to clinical trials. But I'm really passionate, as Kelly will know, and as Jen will know through some of our earlier discussions, about how we can promote the creation of a platform here for clinical research nurses, like the Iacrn has done, and done so incredibly successfully, because we don't have an opportunity to all come together and share our experiences, to share our woes, but also to share our triumphs. And we've got such a vibrant clinical trial sector in Australia, and it's something that I would love to see. But also just to hear from everybody today and around the globe as these visits continue, about what clinical research nursing looks like for you in your environments. Oh, and I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Kaurna people, which is the greater metropolitan Adelaide area.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks. It's awesome. Roberta, are you happy to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hello there, I'm Roberta Litchford. I'm calling in from the University of Queensland and from the Turrbal land. And my background is very much like Mel's. I think Mel and I are roughly about the same age. So I started my career in nursing, and you can hear from my accent, originally that was in Scotland in the UK. But I have been very fortunate to I've got a dual nationality, so I'm both from the UK and also in Australia. My career was, I was a graduate nurse. I was in the second year of when we were just starting BSc in nursing, away back in the, I won't say 80s, away back then. I was involved in nursing for a while, and then I got really interested in research when I had just read a paper on wound healing, and the guy who was actually the main author of the paper was saying that we shouldn't use cotton wool and that we should use gauze for wound healing. And what did he use? Cotton wool. So that was interesting that, the evidence-based practice wasn't actually being practiced. So that got my interest in pure research, and also that anecdotal ward round of various people asking for 3 days this, 7 days the other, and very varied. And that just made me really interested in what's happening here. I was very fortunate I got involved in a research fellow job at the University of Dundee, and then very fortunate to be offered to do my PhD, which I duly did and finished away back in 1997, a long time ago. Then I came out to Australia and set up the Asthma and Allergy Research Institute, again, as I was a clinical nurse, but I was managing the unit at that time. Then went back to the UK and started managing or developing a clinical trials unit, a UK clinical trials unit. For those that are phoning in from the UK, you'll know what that is. And from that, driving strategy of delivering quality clinical trials. And then I came back out to Australia, again, just pre-COVID, and I've been here ever since. And I'm working in the clinical research facility and driving both investigator-initiated studies and commercial studies, and driving education policy, quality management system here at University of Queensland.
Thanks, Roberta. That's amazing. So you can already tell we have just an incredible group of people and so many passionate research nurses here. Ellen, are you happy to introduce yourself and say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country in which we meet today. I am from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. So I am a clinical nurse specialist in renal transplant and chronic kidney disease at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney. Royal Prince Alfred Hospital is a large teaching hospital in Sydney local district, and the renal medicine department that I'm based at is very active in basic and clinical research in kidney disease and epidemiology of chronic kidney disease and kidney transplant. We currently have about 12 active trials and 4 studies on the pipeline, and there's currently 2 of us in the research team. While we're managing all of the active trials and the ones in the pipeline too. Our office is sort of located in the centre of a very high functioning outpatient clinic. So we get to work alongside of the nurse consultants, practitioners and registrars and consultants. Prior to this role, I was a full-time medical surgical nurse, experience in palliation, endoscopy, urology, across both private and public sectors. Fortunately, I came across research nursing pathway, much like Melanie, by chance over 3 years ago. And when a professor I formerly worked with invited me to join her research team. And ever since, this has been my life and I'm loving it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellen. That's fantastic. Kieran, do you want to say hi?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am in Port Macquarie, which is a regional town in New South Wales, Australia, which is on the east coast. We've got beautiful beaches here. This is the Biripi land. And we have a strong respect for their land here in Port Macquarie. So I went to university in a town called Armidale, which is another little country regional university, and did my nursing degree. And from there, I graduated and started working in the oncology infusion clinic straight out from university. So I have been working in oncology for quite a while. And so I did about a year in the oncology infusion clinic and then a year in the radiotherapy unit. And we had a very small research team or unit here in Port Macquarie at that time with just 2 research coordinators and about 10 studies. And one of the research nurses actually broke her leg and left only 1 research nurse in the unit. So they called out for help and was asking if anyone would like to join the unit. And I went, oh, this is an opportunity for me to see what research is. So that was in 2007, and I've been in research ever since then. And our unit has grown from 2 coordinators to we have 7 coordinators now. We started off with about 10 clinical trials, and we're now up to about 60 current trials, not only in oncology, but radiotherapy, hematology, and radiotherapy. So we're a growing unit, and I have been the team leader in the unit and a clinical nurse specialist, and I guess been involved with trying to get the studies up and running here in Port Macquarie for the past 13 years. I do enjoy my job. I love it. And it is very busy here in Port Macquarie because we're a regional centre. We do everything from start to finish. So that's, from your feasibilities all the way through to seeing the patients, taking the bloods, processing bloods, shipping the bloods, and ethics, governance, contract negotiations, and everything in between. So it is busy, but I love it. And I'm happy to be a part of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Sorry, I had to find my unmute again. We're really grateful to have Kieran's regional perspective. Hopefully we'll be able to chat about that further on, one of the challenges we have here, but it's great to have you with us as well. Thanks, Kieran. Jill, are you happy to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? You can.
Yep. Oh, good. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. I duly muted myself.
See your thumbs going up. The penny drop.
No, you're perfect. Go for it.
So my name is Jill Tullock. I work at Fiona Stanley Hospital. I joined clinical research in 1995 at Fremantle Hospital. Prior to that, I was working in coronary care, and the Fremantle Hospital engaged in a large trial called the Lipid study, and they enrolled 300 patients, and they got pretty busy, and so at one point the then trial coordinator asked me if I'd like to join the team, and I did, and I've been there ever since. The unit grew fairly rapidly after that initial trial, and we took on many other trials in cardiology, a lot of them through coronary care. And then when Fiona Stanley Hospital opened up in 2015, the whole cardiology unit, including all the clinical trials that we had up and running in Fremantle at the time in cardiology, all moved over. And there was a massive process of getting them all, through governance and everything. We had about 20 trials that we had to get put through governance all over again. So that was a major job at the time, but we managed to get it through. And I've been there since. I currently work as the clinical nurse manager for the unit. We have 5 other trial registered nurses working on a variety of trials, ranging from drug trials, device trials, registries, investigator-led trials. We're a close-knit team. 3 of us have been together since 1999, so that's 21 years. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. So yes, we have a great team, and really happy to be invited to join up with this, because it's good to get to know other people outside of our unit, which we rarely ever do have any interaction with other nurses around Australia, especially now that that COVID is keeping us away from our interstate meetings, and that's so it's great to finally be able to touch base with some other like-minded people across Australia. And thanks, Kelly, for inviting me.
No, thanks, Jill, for coming. And it'll probably illustrate a little bit about our connections, or our need for, I guess, more connections. If I let you know that Jill works in a hospital about 500 metres away from where I work, and we share a boss, but we had never met before linking in for this Zoom chat. So there are some real kind of challenges for us here in Australia still with linking together, but more about that later. Sam, are you happy to introduce yourself?
I'm very happy to introduce myself. I'm going to start by saying Womanyeka, which means hello in the language of the Kulin Nation people, which is in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I'm from. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people from the Kulin Nation. I'm a critical care research nurse manager at Western Health, which we have the dubious honour of being the hospital that received more COVID-19 patients than anywhere else in Australia during our second wave. But I have an intensive care nursing background. I did my critical care qualifications back a few years ago now, back in about 1997. But at that time I was working at Austin Health in Melbourne, and their intensive care unit had an excessively active research program under the directorship of Professor Ronaldo Bellomo. So research was very familiar to me, but never crossed my radar as to me wanting to pursue a career in research until a friend of mine who was the research nurse in the ICU said to me one day as I was leaving the ICU, Sam, I've got a great idea to get you off night duty, because a lot of intensive care nurses, we end up doing a hell of a lot of night duty because of our 1-to-1 nursing ratios, and I was getting pretty tired of it. She said, we're looking for a research nurse. Do you want to join me? And I went, research? No, I'm not really sure that's what I want to do. She said, no, you'd be great at it. Love to have you join me. And the rest, shall we say, is history. and I've loved it ever since. It's like opening a whole new door into a clinical world and looking at things from a completely different perspective. So I was lucky and fortunate that I had the mentorship of a direct colleague to pretty much teach me what there is to know about how to be a research nurse. And at that stage in time, we did have a clinical trials network for intensive care, which was just starting. And I guess we sort of had some research meetings that were poolside in a lovely tropical setting up in North Queensland. And there was just a few small research nurses that we all bandied around together. And there was probably only about 6 or 7 of us at that time. And where the collaborative trials group wanted to go was to expand and grow onto some huge, big clinical trials. And so we all realised that we needed to bounce a lot of things off each other and connect completely. So I was a very junior novice research nurse at that time, and I was in awe of some of the other research nurses that were really experienced. And I said, well, how do I get to learn what you guys know? So we actually started an education workshop, which now we've just convened our 21st Intensive Care Research Coordinator education workshop meeting. So we're, I think, extremely lucky in the intensive care discipline that we're very well connected and we support each other exceptionally well. The offshoot of my job now is I work at Western Health, which I've been here now for 11 years. That's the western suburbs of Melbourne. And we now have grown. When I first started here, I was the only research nurse doing 4 clinical trials in intensive care. Since that time, I've now built up our research growth in our hospital. We now have a team of 6 research nurses, and we conduct research projects across intensive care and anaesthesia. So we've also I've been pivotal in the starting up of the anaesthesia research coordinator network. So I'm currently the chair of the Intensive Care Research Coordinator Group for the Intensive Care Clinical Trials Group, the ANZIC CTG, and I also sit on the executive panel of the Anaesthesia Research Coordinator Group as they're growing and expanding, using my experience to help shape them. So I feel like I'm very well connected. I can probably tell you the names of maybe about 150, 200 research nurses around Australia and also in New Zealand. We have connections with colleagues in Ireland, the UK, Canada, Singapore in particular. But I certainly know what it's like to be an isolated research nurse working on your own, not knowing who else is out there and recognising that we all need to, connect much better and support each other. I've had some really interesting, how shall I put this delicately, a journey with a classification review at the moment over the last 2 years, which has involved my union. And suffice to say, I've learned a lot about, shall I say, lack of professional recognition within our nursing profession of what we do. Happy to chat to anybody if they want to connect with me and share their stories. This is something I'm really passionate about, is advocating for other research nurses and moving forwards. From a clinical trial perspective, I've done anything and everything. I have sifted through rubbish, looking at recyclables in healthcare on my hands and knees. I've been involved in aerosol studies. It's the latest venture. Sepsis trials, anything and everything. So from really, really small projects, I've headed up my own projects. I've reviewed other projects, pretty much everything across the board. You name it, I've probably done it. But yeah, really excited to be here and chatting to everybody.
Thanks so much, Sam. It's just so cool. This is already an awesome group. So thank you very much for joining us. And last but definitely not least, Chris.
Hi, thanks, Kelly. My name's Chris. I'm coming to you from the Whadjuk country in the north of Perth. I am originally a haematology nurse, and I, pretty much like everyone else, fell into research. Our day unit worked very closely with the research nurses. One of the research nurses left and nobody else wanted to do the job. And I had done a research subject when I did my postgraduate degree, and I thought, I know what I'm doing. 3 months later, I realised I had no idea what I was doing. but very lucky to have supportive colleagues who got me through it. And here I am 15 years later, still involved in research. We were a haematology research unit, but due to lack of resourcing, we ended up also managing infectious diseases studies, storage disorder studies, and respiratory studies. So we were a little bit multi-therapeutic. Had the opportunity to go over and work in Houston for a while as a coordinator over there, which was absolutely an amazing experience. Very quickly discovered that it doesn't matter where in the world you work in research, the basic principles are exactly the same everywhere. So I was surprised at how easy the transition between the two countries was. Came back to Australia, worked for a little bit in phase 1 clinical trials, which was an awesome experience, and then was able to help set up a private research facility in Perth, working with an investigator there. We started off, I was working 1 day a week on one project, and then 2 years later when I left, we had 15 projects and 5 staff members. So then I went on to start my own company. So I provide research services mostly to investigators who work in the private sector. We call ourselves a clinical research organisation pretty much because we're not quite sure what else to call us. We do such a wide range of services, all research related, from providing infusion nurses all the way through to running trials from start to finish, writing protocols, analysing data, putting together abstracts, whatever needs to be done, we help out with that. And that's how I got to know Kelly, was collaborating on a study with her unit. And yes, that's all about me.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's really great to have Chris's lens as well, because as that sort of entrepreneur clinical research nurse, that's a little bit different probably to what is seen particularly in the UK. So it's great to have. So thank you. I mean, massive thank you to everyone on the panel for joining us, because they were all asked with not a massive amount of notice. So just really grateful, and it just really speaks to the passion that people have. I guess I do just need to acknowledge we cover quite a diverse range of specialties and of different groups, but obviously we're still not representative of all the diverse specialties and populations out there. So I guess the chat we have today is, limited potentially by that factor in our individual lenses, but we'll still be able to have a good conversation. So we'll get stuck into things. We're really starting off, so we tried to put a few pickies in as well. Ellen, this is your group, isn't it, at work, and a paper that Mel's contributed to, one of the studies we're running at our clinic here in Perth. But I'm going to ask Ellen to address the first question, which is telling us a bit about, as a clinical research nurse in Australia, what's a typical day like for you?
So I have unmuted myself, I think. Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, just trying to figure that out. So a typical day, speaking from renal trials perspective, the first thing that we do in the morning is to assess if there's been any transplant overnight, or to check if there's any transplantation in the horizon. This is because the deceased donor transplant studies requires the IP dosing to occur during the study, during the surgery, which means the patient needs to be provided with the option of the study, treatment, and the consent all well before the surgery. And so that means that we really get about a couple of hours window before that occurs. So to achieve this, we have to move very quickly. So in case things don't go according to plan, we always have a backup plan, which is a screening backpack, which has all the required screening kits, the lab kits, the consent form, the visit list, everything together. So we kind of grab that, run downstairs to triage, which is our first point of contact with our patient. We will sit down with them in the consult room and go through all the study aspect of things with them. And this is where they will ask us questions, and we'll give them answers and sort of progress into the study. Once this often this is not always the case. The transplants don't occur every single day. So other days it may look like we have a planned visit. So first thing we do is we look at our calendar, which is just here on my side. I would like to show it to you, but it's quite big. It's just a calendar. We handwrite in all of our patient visits, plan it weeks in advance, communicate with our pharmacy, all of our relevant parties, our sub-investigators, principal investigators, in regarding a planned visit, communicate with our patients, of course, remind them that the visits are due a few days in advance. And then once they come into the hospital, we have another type of bag that has everything ready in advance. Take that with us, have all the visit templates, the patient files, the clinic file, and then we run with it and we sit down, talk to the patient, talk about how they've been, has there been any adverse events in the last such and such weeks. And then once the patient visits are done, and the drugs are all dispensed and the patient has left the premises, we come back with the data we've collected, and we generally like to enter the data on the same day if that is possible, or within 7 to 14 days. And answer any data queries that the data manager may have put on. And after that, we generally like to plan for the next day. As you can tell, we have a lot of pre-packed materials. This is probably because there's only 2 of us doing a bit of tangoing around the premises. We really need to be on top of it. There's so many protocols that we're still learning about, and always protocols don't always have all the information in one page or one section. So we just like to be prepared as much as we can be. We also have this system called the Trello board, which is basically documentation of all of our current tasks. So it's like a pipeline. It starts with an alert system saying, these are the meetings that are due today. And it kind of goes, it has my name, my to-do list, the other study coordinator's to-do list, and then a yay list, which is a task that's complete. And then a shout out board, which basically means, thank you, big shout out. If there's something to celebrate, we just post it on there. So we also rely on an electronic sort of a checklist system that helps us to communicate. Sometimes we're not always working on the same day, so it also works as like an electronic form of handover. And of course, no patient private information goes onto the system. It's just purely task-based, so it's just really helping us to sort of project manage. Given that Lynn, who's the other study coordinator, and I, we're both registered nurses, we do not have any project managing backgrounds prior to this role. We really had to seek help and reach out and think creatively, try to think outside of the box, while we also use our nursing critical judgment to attend to our patient needs and to have our patient-centered care that we need to provide for the service. So I think that pretty much wraps up a typical sort of day in my work setting. I'll be interested to hear what everybody else's work setting sounds like, because we're all so different.
You guys sound really organized. I love that you actually respond to your data queries that day. I'm really impressed.
We try. We really try.
And I'm really
interested of that pipeline document, Ellen, so that if anybody wasn't present, everybody knows what needs to be done for whom at any given time. And the fact that it's electronic means you can access it anywhere. I think that's a fabulous initiative.
Yeah, so it's also like it comes, you can download this application on your phone. So if somebody makes a change that instant, it kind of bings and says, oh, Lynn has moved something to the done board. And you go, yes. And you kind of give them the like button, and that's how we roll.
Is anyone else using Trello in their organisations? I mean, you guys overseas, or any others of our panel using that?
Oh, there's so many different types. Like Trello is just one version, one kind, like different type of it. But I've heard there's a lot more professional platforms that manages projects. So Trello is something that I used quite intimately during university times, and it is just something that I kind of carry around where applicable. But yes, there are definitely other platforms out there.
Is there? Oh, sorry. Go for it.
I was just going to say, we do a similar thing. We've got a spreadsheet in OneNote that we've all got access to, and
OneNote.
And we use Microsoft Teams in our organisation, so we can chat to each other and make group chats and things like that. So yeah, using technology, so it means that if we're not at the office, at least we all know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, Teams is an excellent platform as well. We're only just getting onto it. I mean, technically, we don't need, like Lynn and like my other colleague and I don't need to use Teams to communicate because we literally sit right next to each other. But to communicate with other departments and having meetings, it's quite easy, perhaps even easier than Zoom.
Yeah, we do a lot of mobile nursing, so we do a lot of home visits. So, and I also I have nurses in Sydney and nurses in Brisbane as well. So we're not necessarily all in the same location. So it's a really good way to communicate to everyone immediately.
Yeah. I would like to say that project management is central to the role of the research nurse or the research coordinator, and a formal training is critical to the role. And now that we actually are doing so many activities, and we shouldn't be a single point of failure, and as we all work in silos or with small teams, maybe large teams, whichever the size of the team it is, that make sure that it's coordinated and that we deliver having a project management tool. And there's many out there like Smartsheet, Teamworks, etc. There's various other project management tools that are really easy to see, and it's important to see what your workload is today and going forward. When we were trying to manage a COVID-19 trial, when we were trying to upscale how many participants were coming in, how many visits, it was critical to have a project management idea of how you manage that in your staff and resource.
Thank you. Well, I want to move on to a next question if we can. I suspect on any of our questions today, we could probably end up spending our whole session there. But this one, I guess, is going to be a good one really to kick us off with some discussion. I had to put a quokka in there because they're really cute. They live on a little island near Perth in Western Australia. And they're really cute. So I'm going to ask Sam to kick us off with this question of, do you think that the CRN role is well defined or understood within Australia, and why or why not? This is going to be our question, by the way.
Oh, I know, it's a loaded question. I went, oh gee, why did you give me this one? But yeah, okay, all right, we'll give it a go. I think I'm going to answer this in two respects. I think, yes, the role is extremely well recognised and appreciated and supported by, shall I say, our medical colleagues and principal investigators that we work alongside. It's also very well recognised within, say, the Australian Clinical Trials Alliance and also any of our collaborative trial networks absolutely see the value and the worth of what we do. But if you take us outside of that space, and I'll give you a direct example of how well we're not recognised, literally only about 3 days ago, I had to renew my nursing registration with the Australian Health Practitioners Association, or APRA as it's known. So every year you have to go through and you have to answer questions on do you still meet the definitions of a nurse, and where do you work, how many hours do you work per week. But the computer system was not recognising when I was trying to say to it, oh, well, I work in a hospital, and yes, I'm clinical, and I'm a researcher. Those three things, it didn't like it. It seemed to think that if I was a research nurse, that I was completely academic and couldn't work in a clinical setting. So there's a lack, I think, of understanding within our own nursing registration. I'll give you some really good examples of the discussions that I've been having with my nursing union and my classification, and some background to that. And this is the difficulty that even within our nursing profession, we're not well recognised. So for the very first time about 4 years ago here in Victoria, we had research nurse classifications that were embedded in our enterprise bargaining agreement for nursing pay and nursing role recognition. So that was actually a huge win. but they're hugely deficient. Out of the entire nursing document of all the nursing roles that there are, for some reason they embedded in there that there were 4 different levels of research nurses, of which 2 of them it started talking about you needed to have master's or PhD requirements, for instance, to hold that particular title. So when I started digging into this a lot further, I was being told that, okay, there are other options, for instance, as, say, clinical nurse practitioners, clinical nurse consultants, but we're not recognised and not allowed to go through a clinical nurse consultant pathway or even a clinical nurse practitioner pathway because we're not seen as clinical. So I'm starting to raise lots of questions within my own nursing profession. Even the professional officers with my nursing union didn't fully understand what it was that we do. And even my nursing executives, including my director of nursing within my own hospital, don't fully recognise what I do. So we're not very well supported. My position description was called into question during all of these discussions, and they said to me, oh, now it's interesting, you're not reporting to anybody from a nursing infrastructure for professional development. And I said, who would I be discussing that with? Because from my perspective, anybody from higher up in nursing executive have a very scant view of what I do, but don't fully understand what I do. So I'm not sure how I can be professionally supported from colleagues that don't understand my job role. So I think there's different layers and levels of that. So, for instance, there is a clinical nurse consultant group here in my health network, and I lobbied long and hard for research nurses to be included in that because we're not getting any professional support. We're not linking into, higher discussions happening within healthcare that would be a benefit to us. Or conversely, we have a great skill set and level of experience that we can offer other clinical nurse consultants that might want to undertake research that don't know how to do it. And there's a lot of that happening as well. So it's this lack of recognition of our skill set and what we can bring to that space. So suffice to say, we're chipping away at that. To my knowledge, I'm also involved in the Victorian Association of Research Nurses, or VARN, and we're a special interest group from our nursing union, the ANMF. But to our knowledge, we're the only group that exists. There are nothing like that in other states, for instance. So we'd love to connect, and I think that's why this discussion and understanding of what Iacrn can do, and to even hear if there are other nurses in collaborative research nurse groups that are connecting and discussing things together. But I think for me, the crucial clincher comes when you start talking to research nurses about their contract arrangements, their funding arrangements, their pay scales, even areas where they work. There are some nurses that are stuck in a little tiny workstation in the basement of the hospital that's miles away from their clinical area that they may be associated with. There's that lack of understanding that if you are working within a clinical discipline, recruitment, connection, collaboration with your clinical colleagues works so much better when you're allowed to be in that environment. There's just a lack of understanding of our requirements and what we need. For instance, those of us that are operating centrifuges or accessing -80 fridges, accessing different types of equipment, it's incredibly important to know what we need. We're doing a rebuild of our hospital at the moment, and I've actually found myself, luckily, on an advisory panel to advise about research requirements in the new hospital build. But boy, I can tell you there's not a lot of insight into recognising that it's great to have, administrative areas and a locked office so that you can store confidential patient documents and trial records, that you can't just, necessarily easily work in an open plan working environment, particularly if you're doing sensitive patient follow-up phone calls and connections. So I don't know, have I lifted the lid on a few of those, and I'm keen to see if anything resonates with a few others.
You definitely have. I'm really happy for our other panel members to jump in, but this might also be just a really good time for Jen if I ask Jen, who I've just seen pop up to remind me, to give us a little bit of info on IACRN. So I'm aware that most of our panel members are probably aware of IACRN, but Ellen and myself, and there's one other member within Australia as well, Rick, who couldn't be with us. But it may well help us to move on to the next part of our chat. Jen, if you'd just be happy to give a bit of a brief summary of what IACRN have done in this space already.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? I'm hoping that it's a yes. And I can't see any of you anymore because I've just pulled something up on my
you're
screen.
on.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks for the verbal. So I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm really more excited that you're all here actually today. So thank you so much for making time to join in. I'm really proud to be the president of IACRN this year. So my term started last year, and what a year to take over, which was an extraordinary time for all of us. And we usually have our conference, and that didn't happen. So I really wanted to have these events virtually, because the virtual event we put on in October was really well received, and the more connections we can make internationally, I think the better. So IACRN came about, it was 2009, and prior to that, there had been a group of nurse managers who were based in America in the NIHR-funded General Clinical Research Centers. And they had funding to meet every year at this huge annual conference in Washington, where all of the staff from all of the GCRCs. You have to ask Gordon to say that at some point, because he says it with a wonderful Scottish accent.
No, you don't.
Mute yourself, man. Show a little respect. No, you must, because it's so funny. It's adorable. I make him say it whenever I see him. So at the GCRC event in 2008, it was announced that their funding was changing. So the ability for all these different staff groups and directors and everybody to meet each year was going to change. And in fact, it was affecting the nurses more than anyone. And at that meeting, it was decided that they wanted to set up an organization and open it to all research nurses, not just the managers. And that's where IACRN came in. And in fact, it was going to be the National Association of Clinical Research Nurses. And, you know, that seemed like a very good approach. But I was there. And I had been turning up at their GCRC meetings for a number of years and getting involved and learning from them and bringing things home to the UK. I'm originally from New York, which might, be why you might be confused about my crazy accent. So I grew up and trained in New York, and I've been in the UK now almost 28 years. So I'm definitely well embedded here at the moment. In any case, IACRN decided that it had to be international because I was there, and I was determined to roll things out here. And over the years, I and colleagues like Gordon and Claire and others on the call have worked really hard to bring their best practice and their ideas. And the vision is about enhancing clinical research quality and safety through specialized nursing practice. And this was really important. And the whole point of this organization, in addition to all the learning and the networking, was to get recognition of a specialty of clinical research nursing, which happened in 2016 with the publication of the Scope and Standards of Clinical Research Nursing. And that was adopted by the American Nursing Association. And that gave the platform that was needed to go for board certification in clinical research nursing. And that's exactly what has happened this year with the launch of Clinical Research Nurse Board Certification, CRN BC. The first intake was in April, and the second intake will be October. And every year from now on, April and October 1st of April, 1st of October, will be the dates that submissions have to be made in order to be considered. It's by portfolio, which is something I pushed for. And it definitely recognizes the things that clinical research nurses do. It's not an academic-based portfolio, although you get points, for your academic knowledge and practice and degrees and all of that, which is brilliant. But I really, really wanted to make sure that this was going to be something that nurses I know and love and work very closely with and value extremely highly, who are at the bedside running clinical research studies and supporting participants and patients and have that very specialized, unique skill set would be able to achieve this portfolio recognition. And they've done that. And it's a beautiful blend of both. And I urge you to have a look at iacrn.org if you haven't already. And all the information is there. It's a 5-year certification piece, which is in line with other certifications in the States, but you don't have to be in America to apply and achieve it. Thanks, Mel. So please do have a look and share it with your colleagues. And we in the UK, so I'm a matron in the clinical research facility in Southampton, an NIHR funded facility, one of 21 in the UK. And I am also Associate Director of Nursing for NIHR at the moment, which is a very exciting secondment opportunity I have for 3 days a week. And using that position and the timing just now of certification being created is really quite a wonderful position to be in. We have a new Director of Nursing who starts today, and her name's Ruth Endicott. And she's very interested in this as well as the Director of Workforce for the Clinical Research Network, which is part of NIHR, and which is the bit that funds all the research nurses around the country who work in hospital settings. There's another bit that funds the research facilities, but joining it all up will be Ruth. And she is very keen, as is the Director of Workforce for the CRN network. So it's a unique moment, and I think something big could come of it in the next year or so. And I see this as a way of valuing research nurses. I see this as a way of also allowing the expertise to be recognized, because there's also a piece of work looking at the staff who are not nurses, who work in teams with nurses, who are perhaps clinical trials assistants, clinical research practitioners. They may have a science degree, they may not have a science degree. They're taking blood from participants, they're running some of the studies, coordinating things perhaps, but they have a clinical facing role. And in the UK, there's been a lot of work done to regulate this group of staff, clinical research practitioner group of staff, and that's available. If you Google CRPs or clinical research practitioners UK, you'll get some information around that. And what nurses have been saying is, well, that's wonderful for our colleagues to get recognition for their research experience, but we want recognition for our research experience. And that's where I think IACRN provides the answer, as well as the education, as well as the opportunities for networking. So it's a very exciting time. Please join the UK sessions and all the other sessions this week, because I see Lucy's just joined, and she's a colleague from the NIHR CRN, and she has worked really hard with me to get these sessions organized. And I think you'll be really happy to hear what colleagues around the world are doing. And I know there'll be more about this on the UK sessions that Gordon and Claire have delightfully organized for us over this week. So thanks, and I'll stop talking. I could go on forever to talk about research nursing, and that would be a shame, because I want to hear from you. And you joined Australia's chat to hear from Australia. That's what I've done, and to see these little animals.
Listen, I think it's a really valuable background, particularly with IACRN still being quite new to Australia. So I think it's great to hear what's been achieved so far, and definitely is in line with what we're trying to do. We'll get back to Australian chat, because we're really starting to delve into some of the major things here. And I wanted to throw a question to Kieran, who is working regionally, because I think she will have some unique insights here into what you think are really some of the main challenges for CRNs in Australia. Or anyone from the panel wants to jump in as well, but Kieran, if you want to kick us off.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to focus more on the regional side of things from challenges that I think I face as a research nurse. So at the beginning of this panel, I was saying that it started off with just 2 research nurses in our unit, and then we've now grown to 6 nurses with about 60 studies. We are all just RNs in the unit. We don't have anyone specialised to do our startup activities or our budgets or negotiations with sponsors. We take all our own blood. We do the feasibilities. We meet with sponsors. We, take the bloods. We process the bloods. We ship the bloods. We do the ethics. We do the governance. We lead site. So we're basically it. We all have our own trial load of about 12 studies each because we're quite busy at the moment. And that includes also patient care. So we don't actually give the trial infusions, but we, we see the patients every time they come in. We've got to give them their questionnaires. We do, everything that a study coordinator would do, but as well as everything else. So I think the challenges as a regional site is yes, I know, not just nurses, I shouldn't say that. But as a regional site, it's just the recognition that I feel that we don't have here with our public health system. It's hard. I'm now classified as a clinical nurse specialist, but I really had to fight just to get to a grade 1 clinical nurse specialist grading to get a bit of a pay rise, and to fight for that. I had to have pages and pages of documentation of what I did. However, I'm the only CNS in the unit, and the other staff are classified as registered nurses, but do basically the same as me. But once again, trying to fight to get that grading is really hard in public health. So for many years, it's just, I think it's been hard, and workload has been hard. But we've grown, which is good. And I think also, you think of the executives in the public health, everyone wants to do clinical trials. The doctors want to do clinical trials. Everyone wants to make it work, but it's getting the staff to run the trials. And I think that's what we're finding hard as a regional centre. We do have a large catchment area and a large retirement population of over 60s. So, a lot of trials that we do recruit to are quite busy, and we do recruit very well too. So it's, little things like organising couriers for shipments to get the blood sent overseas. Our dry ice has to be organised and come up on a plane the day before because we're not in a city. So that's, phone calls to shipment companies. And so I think, challenges of regional site. I mean, we're doing well for what we are, but I think recognition in Australia for nurses in the research unit is, I feel, quite poor, as Samantha said. I think it'd be really nice to have a group to, I don't know, if everyone could come together and, as one, and we could prove what we do as a organisation. I think as a regional site, that's what I wanted to say. But networking too, I think in Australia, I find it hard to meet up with other research nurses. This has been good. It's been really good. However, conferences, I feel like we don't have many conferences in Australia for research nurses and study coordinators. We do sometimes have them attached to a collaborative group conference, like we have AGITG or the breast cancer group trials. Every year, all these collaborative groups have an annual conference, and they might just hook on the start of that a day for study coordinators to get together. So that's one area where I think we would benefit. And it is really nice to meet up with other nurses at those conferences. but just, you know, how about just a conference for clinical trial coordinators where we could all meet up just for us, not just, you know, a one-day event hooked on the end of a collaborative group meeting. So, yeah, I mean, we can aim big, and I think it's getting better, and I think we are getting recognised a little bit more. And, you know, in the 13 years I've been involved, we have grown, but I think there's a lot more work to do. And, yeah, I hope that we can move forward and, yeah, get this group going and education as well, you know. I think once we all get together, we can, yeah, just share our thoughts and education, and everyone's on the same path, I believe. Oh, and I must say, sorry, also, in the last couple of years, SCRS is another group that's just been involved in Australia with conferences, annual conferences. And I have been to a couple of those, and that was great networking for coordinators, and some, you know, sponsors go there as well, and we can network with the sponsors as well. But it's still not just a group for research nurses. It's study coordinators and everyone in regards to research. But it'd be really nice to just have a research nurse coordinator conference group.
Well, if you're in Melbourne in late September, come along to the Victorian Association of Research Nurses Professional Development Day, because we're research nurses from across many different disciplines getting together. But equally, anyone's welcome to come to any of my intensive care research nurse workshops. They're always very early March in Noosa, which is a lovely place to be, and also the anaesthesia research nurse workshop, which is coming up soon, which I think it's going to be in Brisbane in early August. So, but you're right, they're a bit more specific, those two ones. But yeah, if we can get something moving with connecting up with the VAN group or having something like that that's a bit more nationally based, I think would be fantastic.
You could also do it virtually. If you did it hybrid, so that people could, all of the conferences that IACRN puts on from now on will always be a hybrid. There'll always be a virtual component, so that people in far-flung areas or who aren't able to afford the travel will be able to attend as well. So, I mean, if you think something's needed, Karen, you should do it. You could do it. You could.
I could do it.
You could do it. That's how things get done. Is people who find that something's needed, they do it.
Yes, it is finding the time, though. I think that's the trouble at the moment. But you know, maybe this group we could get together and we could brainstorm.
Yes,
we've got to convene a panel right here.
You know, IACRN has chapters across the world, and I'm encouraging Kelly and Mel to think about creating, and I know they're already thinking about it themselves. They don't need me to do that. Create a chapter which could be a sort of focal point to bring some of this together as well. So Gordon and Claire have done that in the UK, and that's how these sessions have been created, is asking the chapters across the world to host these sessions. So that's how the countries were selected, were people that are already there doing work like that.
I think the other thing to remember in Australia too is that although we're all of one nation, unfortunately, each state or territory within Australia almost operates like its own country. We've certainly seen that with the border closures, with COVID, infections happening from time to time, and suddenly Western Australia shuts out everybody else and vice versa. But the same thing is unfortunately said with, say, regulatory oversight to clinical trials, that there are state-based laws and jurisdictions that differ greatly. So sometimes I must admit, although a national approach would be good, I think there's also something to be said for more regional and geographic meetings, so that you can vent your frustrations or shared collegiality with colleagues working within the same regulatory space, shall we say.
Yeah, do that, because we did that too in America. So their chapters, just even in cities. So Boston has a chapter. There's one in the region of the Rocky Mountain region or Ohio Valley as well. So there's all different ways. And Gordon and Claire have gone UK and Ireland and kind of European. So it just really, depends. There's Beijing, there's Shanghai, there's all of Japan. Whatever works, Samantha. There's lots of options, and you can create your own ways of integrating and sharing. It's wonderful.
About 11 years ago, they tried to, I love this word, streamline clinical trials and have an integrated approach. But sadly, I think since that time, the intent was there, but it's all since sort of disintegrated since that point, and it's made it quite difficult. But
reality hits sometimes.
I think we've achieved a lot with our national mutual acceptance, and I hear what you're saying, Sam, and I recognise that there are the jurisdictional nuances, but it's been such a barrier in this country, and this siloed approach to the way we practice, when we're all practicing as CRNs, particularly if we're focusing on that role, and what we do on a day-to-day basis is all the same. And I just imagine the power of a collective conversation with all of us coming together and really creating a national approach. So at least we can say we have something that belongs to everybody.
It's a bit like religion, really, isn't it?
Yes. Less divisive than that, Sam. No, but I would absolutely agree with that, because obviously, if you think about the UK and Irish branch, then the kind of legislative infrastructure for the England and Wales is different from Scotland, and obviously Ireland's a different country as well. But I think there's what I really get, and I guess even from the discussions so far this morning or this afternoon for you guys, is that there's far more that unites us than divides us, and I think that the commonalities, if you like it, there's huge amount of areas of discussion and agreement that you can have there. And I think just thinking about the vast geography of Australia, you're bound to have clinical research nurses who are working in, rural areas who, have never ever really met another clinical research nurse face to face. So I think if you can build up a community, that would be such an important thing, and to help to stop some of the isolation that CRNs feel on a all too regular basis.
Roberta, go for it.
Yeah, just I think a nomenclature issue that we also have is that it's the term clinical research nurse, and then we slip into coordinator role or trial manager role, etc. It's understanding. It's a bit like a Venn diagram, isn't it? So it's a hybrid position where I think, sorry, the lady, she's gone, Kieran has gone, I can't see her now. She's very much, from start to end, doing all the administrative roles, etc., but also that clinical masterpiece in there. So we're doing so many roles, but then should we be doing all those roles? Because is that the most efficient way to do clinical trial management? And research nurse, should they be doing that, or doing all the nursing roles? Or it's the definition of the core competencies. And it depends where you are, because when you're regional, you have to maybe have that huge role and position description. And I would like to say part of the registration issue, Sam, that you mentioned, the same happened in the UK, and it comes to what I've just said about the definitions. If you had the word clinical research nurse in your title, it was easier to get your certification in the UK. But if you were a clinical trial coordinator or manager without the term nurse, it was very difficult. So it is quite important to get those that nomenclature and that role definition clear where we can.
I think coming in on that point you made about, is it the most efficient use of our time? I think as the global nursing crisis evolves, and as most of us will be retiring within the next 4 or 5 years, and there's going to be a huge problem. I think hiving off the bits where possible that we don't have to be the experts in. And in fact, that's something we did locally in Southampton very early on. A new director thought, well, why are the nurses doing that? And that was sort of something he kept shouting from the rooftops. You need more nurses, but why are they doing this? And why are they doing that? So we developed a project management team. We developed the lab staff. We developed the administrative infrastructure to support the nurses so that the nurses could focus on the bits that they had to focus on, and where possible, find other people. And that's where this CRP role has been so helpful within teams to do some of the work that the nurses didn't have to do.
Yes, because we're not going to become professional and have a profession if we're doing the whole remit. We have to have a clear role and professionalism within that level of, that level of expertise.
But that also comes down to funding.
Yeah.
I'd love to have administrative support, and I'd love to expand my team. But this is, I think, the core problem, is that if we're not recognised professionally for what we do, even within our own nursing profession, healthcare in Australia seems to be very focused towards, funding the here and now. We're not very good at looking much further down the track and funding the bigger long-term sort of stuff. So it's really difficult to leverage to get a business case going, to get more funding support. It's very much about, okay, you've got this trial, so you need someone to work for this many hours. And this is the problem, is that then we either lose nurses who have developed a skill set and expertise within that area, because then their contract expires and we can't renew their contract. So there is a lot of drift and transient, I suppose, support and lack of sort of, keeping people in this profession as well. And people will drift out because either they don't get enough hours or just don't get that job security that perhaps you do if you're, and I find this really curious as to how we've evolved as a professional discipline that's evolved very differently from, say, a pain nurse consultant or a wound care nurse, or any of those other more clinical hats that nurses tend to wear. They seem to be recognised much better, but we don't. We still struggle with that.
That's where our board certification, I think, will make such a difference, because it does recognise that. And
yeah.
And I'd just like to ask, so really talking about networks and potential benefit, I just want to link in Jill to the chat as well, because Jill, you work, I guess, within a hospital setting, so there's some support there and some clinical governance support, but I know equally you have some of these same challenges. Would you mind just telling us from your perspective what the impact or benefits might be of a CRN network from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yes, listening to Samantha and all the trouble that she went through in order to get the position classified, etc. I went through exactly the same. I can relate to that. I actually went through it twice. Once at Fremantle, it took me 3 years. And then I just got that up and running. And then when we transitioned over to Fiona Stanley, they kind of agreed to put everyone back to the basic clinical nurse role. So therefore then the CNS position was demolished as such. So then I had to go through the process all over again, and that took me 4 years. And finally in 2019, I think it was, they created a position for a clinical, they call it clinical nurse, clinical research manager. So, yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with, lack of understanding of what our role is. And I think that if we did have like a board certification, it may help other people in the institution, senior executives, understand what our role is and understand that it is a specialised role, just like, like the pain nurse or the diabetic nurse or whomever, it would hopefully provide us greater recognition as a specialist role. As far as, divvying up the funding and, pulling out the clinical aspects of what we do in the nursing aspects, and then separating out the admin aspects. Yes, I think that's a great idea, because a lot of the stuff that we do can be done by clerical staff if we could get that support. But there again comes the issue of funding. We are entirely funded by the pharmaceutical trials that cover our costs for wages, etc. So our contracts rely on us having a substantial balance in our accounts in order to, continuously roll over our contracts. And this has been, a problem in attracting nurses to do clinical research, because you're solely reliant on commercial or industry sponsored trials to fund the unit. It's not attractive to junior nurses wanting to take on and wanting to join up as clinical research nurses when there is no security, A, for funding, and B, for their next contract. They could potentially not be renewed depending on how well you perform in a trial, etc. And along with that, then in WA we have different kind of like legislations, etc., and different policies. And now now they've got a policy where in WA, how any government hospitals, the hospital or the health service will assume responsibility for managing the funds, and for that they take a 10% out of whatever we earn for for patient visits, etc. So any invoice they take a 10% cut off. So now that's reducing our income further. Which it's a battle to have enough money in the account to keep on and recruiting new staff. So we have a small team, and I think it will forever be a small team. It's hard to expand and take on new staff, let alone have time then to train new staff, because that takes out. We don't get paid for training. Clinical trials don't pay you for training up new staff. So that then becomes another impost on our budget. So we struggle with with a whole variety of issues, mostly relating to funding, and also job security for the nurses, and trying to make it attractive to nurses to want to enroll, or maybe even just dip their feet in the water to try out what it would be like to be involved in clinical research. So the struggles on many levels, but I think it's commonly shared. Certainly listening to the other panelists, we encounter exactly the same difficulties.
Can I just add? I think another problem with trying to promote clinical trial nursing to some of the staff, well, especially in my centre, is there's nowhere to go up the ladder. So there's no growth. You're a trial coordinator, and we don't have any roles to, grow into. I mean, as I said, I had to fight to get the CNS position, and I even think, not saying I'm fantastic, but I probably should be paid more for what I do, and I think everyone agrees the same. Just climbing the ladder, I think, is, it's there's no. I think to promote clinical trials and for nurses, they'll come in here and it's kind of a stepping stone for them. So they'll come for 12 months, learn the job, learn research, put it on their CV, and go get another job somewhere else where they can be paid more for what they do. So that's just another issue that we have here in at our site, Public Health New South Wales.
Yeah, Kieran, I totally, my heart goes out to you. Like it just hits a spot because it sounds so all too familiar. Getting my CNS status was also such a journey involving multiple discussions with our district leaders and managers, trying to sort of help them understand the kind of role that we do, and also doing budgeting, invoicing as a registered nurse, learning all these new skills, and also not having that sort of career pathway really in line for us. We really have to find those things ourselves, don't we? We have to go and grab them, find out. The retention of clinical nurse the retention of study coordinators in this area is also quite interesting topic. I think it's probably a whole different, it could probably be a whole topic on its own, but I think it really, I think it also is impacted by not having sort of for us, we have a district manager who has very little knowledge behind clinical trials. So they are our managers, but they don't necessarily know what we do or the journeys that we take to get to day-to-day activities done. So when we do our appraisals, when we go and seek mentorship to our managers, it's really very little sort of advice that not little, but I suppose not as relevant or limited advices as well. So I've been pretty constant in this role, but while I've been here, there's been quite a few nursing staff who've come and gone. I think there's been, about 6 nursing staff in the last 2 years or so, just coming and going. And that would mean for us training them, giving them the resources, the time, and then you see them leaving in 6 months' time. It just breaks your heart. And you want to tell them this is a good role, you can grow as well. But then at the same time, the system doesn't provide the career path that you really have, and the training and the tertiary education. Where are all of these things? Because this is an area where there's a big gap for learning. There's always room for improvement. But those systematic things as well as individualistic things are just so many gaps.
You're right, Ellen.
I just went out in attention.
Yeah, but I'm starting at a very different level too, and I'm perhaps in that benefit role of working alongside directly my intensive care nurses and also anaesthesia nurses and also nurses in the wards. So we're running clinical trials with ward nurses who have never participated in research, have never been exposed to trials before. So I make it a really big PR thing. If I'm coming to the bedside nurse to say, hey, listen, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m, I need you to take a BSL on a particular patient, and this is why, because we're doing this fantastic trial and it's all about this. So I'm really trying to chip away at educating and advocating for research nurses from other nurses that we work alongside, and particularly new graduate nurses, because I sort of look to them, they're the future. So if we can, get them to understand what research nurses do and to sell our profile and who we are, then that's how I like to approach it.
Yeah, no, I hear. I am really interested in sort of finding out a way to get these trainings, or perhaps even putting together an orientation package for new graduate nurses who approach me and say, hey, how did you get into your role? I've never even heard of it. Well, some would say, and I would say, oh, it would be so fantastic if there would be a sort of a systematic or district training package that I could address and say, here's some stuff that you can review or learn. Other than just coming and popping in and having a chat with me, which I love, but just things like that. And I am at the moment looking at putting together a package just because there's been so many interest, but not really having something as structured just yet. And also doing the, being a clinical nurse coordinator, and also trying to work out how to get this training book together at spare time has been a bit of a challenge itself. But yeah, I hear you.
So I'm loath to interrupt what is now. I think we could go on all afternoon because it's you can really sense it. I guess this is the beginning for us, and it's a really exciting beginning. I do just I haven't been able to link in Chris or Roberta for their questions yet, and I sort of want to throw them a bit of a curveball question to finish off, and the rest of the panel, because we've only got a few more minutes. But I wanted to ask all of our panel members, starting with Roberta and then Chris, if you kind of had that magic wand. This is my favourite sort of magic wand question from a colleague in the UK. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing for us as CRNs here in Australia, what would it be? Sorry to put you on the spot, Roberta, but I'll go to you first.
Just one thing?
Just one, I'm afraid.
Wow. I think it must start from the very beginning, and is the introduction to the role of clinical research nurse as an opportunity, and that's about credentialing, etc. But I'm going to throw in a curveball and wonder if our roles are actually going to be extinct in the future when we go into the learning healthcare system, i.e., as Sam was touching on, research is going to be integral into our healthcare system. So are we going to be separate, or are we all nurses are now going to be researchers?
Ooh, I like that. That's a question for the next tweet chat, I reckon. And Chris, can I ask you the same question? I'm really sorry we didn't. Your question was going to be around recommendations anyway. But yeah, Chris, from your perspective, what would be your kind of magic wand thing for CRNs in Australia?
Can I ask for more hours in the day? Is that allowed?
No, more wine, yes. No,
well, I think the biggest thing is that nobody knows exactly what we do, and even the people that think they know what we do don't really know what we do. So I'd really love that recognition, like when you say I'm a clinical research nurse, everyone to go, oh, that's fantastic, instead of going, oh, I have no idea what that means. So that would be my magic wand moment.
Yeah. What about Jill? For you, Jill, what would it be?
Yeah, that's exactly what I put down, formal recognition and a career pathway. I think that's the first thing we need to do to attract, number one for us, and number two to attract, younger nurses into wanting to find out more and to understand what the role is and to see it as a career path for them. If they wanted to get outside of, bedside nursing or, clinic nursing or, private education, whatever, if they want to go down an alternative clinical pathway, to have formal recognition and formal recognition within the institution. And, hospitals don't recognise clinical research nurses as being part of their workforce. Their clinical research nurses, in my experience, have historically been somebody who's been tapped on the shoulder by a doctor who wants to do a clinical trial, and he or she have identified a nurse working in the ward or the unit and said, oh yeah, that'll be good. I'm going to ask them if they'd like to be my research nurse and get this trial up and running. And I think historically that's how it's happened over the years. Whereas I think if we had a formal recognition and a career pathway where everybody knows that a clinical nurse, a research nurse is a specialist role, and they can apply for it and look at it as an attractive proposition to an alternative career pathway in nursing.
Thank you. Ellen, what about you? What's your magic wand moment?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I think, I don't know, for me, I'm like, oh, one is really hard. But I think, no, it's okay. I think everything that everybody has touched base is so important. And I think I would agree. My heart really does lie on the engagement of CRNs and the retention of CRNs. So that's just my experience. So if I had a magic wand, I would wish that the district or the system will take the engagement of CRNs a lot more seriously, which would hopefully influence the motivation and the interest in furthering the future career path of the field. That would be my wish.
Thank you. What about you, Karen?
I think everyone's heard my wishes, but I agree with everyone else. I think it's just the recognition as trial nurses, coordinators, whatever we want to be called at the moment, and just having that career pathway that's attractive for nurses. And I think that's my main magic wish, and I hope it comes true.
All right. How about Sam? We'll throw over to you, Sam.
I would say funding support. I'd like to find a clinical research nurse funded for every discipline in every ward across the hospital, and that we are just seen as part of the clinical care, or to have, one funded research nurse in every outpatients clinic, everywhere. I'd like to see guaranteed funding for all of us that is separate and very distinct from grant funding. So we should all just exist in healthcare and are just as important as any other type of nurse. We're just there.
Wow.
I completely agree with you, Sam. I reckon that would be great.
Amazing. Mel, what about you?
Well, I think you know where my area of passion lies, and it is around making sure that we have good and robust education systems that are endorsed and supported right across this country, that we have some sort of standardisation, that we stop the mentorship role, that, you know, we just keep passing down bad habits, that nurses no longer fall into clinical trials, that they actually recognise it as an important and exciting career pathway. And I love what Sam said. Imagine if we could have a nurse in every discipline who was focused around clinical research nursing and the promotion of research, but also about promoting nurses to become researchers. Wow. So for me, it's about education and awareness and a national forum.
It's thank you. I mean, we're right on our time. I think we could have easily spoken for hours and hours more, and I wish we had that time. And as I said, I think this is a real sort of beginning for us, and just even having a group, really quickly put together group of such passionate people. It just, you can feel it through the screen, just how everyone feels about this specialty, what's driving people, the difference that people can make. So I'm just so grateful. It's been a fantastic chat to listen to. I hope everyone around the world has enjoyed it, wherever you're listening to. Can we get a photo? We can definitely get a photo. I did take a screenshot, cheeky screenshot before. But
Did you? And did everyone have their cameras on?
I think so. Oh, I didn't get one of those full screen ones because I've got the slides up.
If you take your slides down.
Okay, I'll take the slides down. But thank you so much to everyone for being part of it. So if everyone can whack their videos on, and we'll do, if you can, and we'll do one of those cheesy Zoom shots. Perfect. If I know how to do a screenshot on the Mac, I usually have to Google it first. So,
oh, it's great to see everybody's faces.
It's great to see you. Oh, Claire, cop out.
Claire, come on. Jeez. There's one in every call.
There we go. I've taken a photo. No, thank you so much, everyone. It's been great to be a part of this, and great to meet all of you and just to be able to chat about research nursing. So thank you, all very welcome. We will try and have Iacrn maybe down in Margaret River in WA sometime. We'll see how that goes, Jen, international conference, so we can all get together.
Absolutely. That's the way forward. There's so much to learn from each other.
Do you have any closing remarks, Jen? Are we the best country so far? I think it's probably right.
Of course you are.
Yeah.
The best and the biggest and the most engaged. And oh, if Taiwan heard me, they'd be very cross. But no, it's just wonderful. And I'm so grateful to you all for making time and presenting your thoughts and being so open and honest about issues. And this is the way we move things forward. And the only way, I think, is to do it together and to be really strong and brave. And if you want the change to happen, you have to make it happen. No one's going to do it for you. And we have to just demonstrate the immense value that you make and your colleagues make every day. So yay for research nurses and yay for you. So thank you.
Jen, can I just jump in and say a quick thank you to Kelly for all of her efforts, and, you know, like everybody on the discussion, she's juggling all of that and children, and she's done a great job of making this all run through. So thank you, Kelly.
And you too, Mel. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It doesn't happen without us all. So thanks so much. All right, we'll love and leave you, and we'll see you guys in the UK next.